Egypt is rife with terrifying mythologies, stories of deformed beasts who judge your soul and eat your heart. The stories are endless and plentiful in pop culture today, particularly in films such as The Mummy, one of my faves. So today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 scariest Egyptian myths. Before we begin, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. Let's jump in. Coming in at 5, the 7-year famine. The 7-year famine is a narrative from the famous inscription discovered on a rock on the island of Sahel in 1890 by Charles Wilbur. The story goes that in the 18th year of King Tches, the whole region of the south, the island of Elephantine, and the district of Nubia were ruled by the high official Matar. The king sent a dispatch to Matar informing him that he was in great grief by reason of the reports which were brought to him into the palace as he sat upon his throne, and because for 7 years there had been no satisfactory inundation of the Nile. As a result of this, grain of every kind was very scarce, vegetables and garden produce of every kind could not be found, and in fact the people had very little food to eat in general, which in turn resulted in men robbing their neighbours. In the midst of this terrible trouble, King Tches remembered the god Imhotep, the son of Ptah of the South Wall, who had once delivered Egypt from a similar calamity. However, his help was no longer forthcoming, which resulted in Tches asking his governor Matar to tell him where the Nile rose and what god or goddess was its duty. Matar compiled the information and delivered it to the king, informing him the Nile flood came forth from the island of Elephantine, whereon stood the first city that ever existed, and out of it rose the sun when he went forth to bestow life upon man, and therefore it is also called doubly sweet life. The guardian of the flood was Khnemu, and it was he who kept the doors that hold it in, and who drew back the bolts at the proper time. The king in turn was forced to make offerings to Khnemu, who finally appeared before him, stating, "I am Khnemu the creator, my hands rest upon thee to protect thy person and to make sound thy body. I gave thee heart, I am he who created himself, I am the primeval watery abyss, and I am the Nile who riseth at his will to give health for me to those who toil. I am the guide and director of all men, the Almighty, the Father of the gods, Shai, the mighty possessor of the earth." Following this speech, the god promised the Nile would rise every year, and described the good which would come upon the land when he would end the famine. Coming in at 4, Isis and the 7 scorpions. One popular story from Egyptian mythology discusses Isis and the 7 scorpions. It goes like this: whenever Isis left Horus in the evening while they were hiding in the papyrus swamps near Buto, she was accompanied by 7 scorpions. Completely normal. 3 of the scorpions preceded her, Petet, Chetet, and Metet, and made sure that the path ahead was safe. At her side were the scorpions Mesetet and Mestetef, and behind was Tefen and Befen. Every night Isis warned her friends to be extremely cautious as to avoid alerting Seth as to where she was. One night Isis was traveling to the town of the 2 sisters in the Nile Delta. A noble woman saw the strange group arrive and quickly closed her door. The scorpions were enraged by this act of rudeness and decided to teach the woman a lesson. 6 of the scorpions gave their individual poisons to Tefen, who loaded his stinger with it, during which time a young peasant had offered her home to Isis and her group as refuge. However, this still did not please the scorpions, and Tefen snuck out of the house. He crawled under the door of the woman and stung her son. Obviously distraught, the woman wandered through the town seeking help for her child. Isis heard the woman's cries and aided the woman. She held the boy in her arms and spoke words of magic. She named each other scorpions and thereby dominated them, rendering their combined poison to be harmless in the child. The woman became humbled by Isis's act of kindness and in turn offered her all of her worldly wealth and the peasant girl who had shown hospitality to a stranger. So sweet. Coming in at 3, Ammit, also known as the devourer of the dead, was a demoness and goddess in ancient Egyptian religion with a body that was part lion, hippopotamus, and crocodile, aka the 3 largest man-eating animals known to ancient Egypt. This terrifying beast's other titles include devourer of the dead, eater of hearts, and greeter of death, and lived near the scales of justice in Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Now in the Hall of 2 Truths, Anubis weighed the heart of a person against the feather of Mart, the goddess of truth, which was depicted as an ostrich feather. If the heart was judged to be not pure, Ammit would devour it, and the person undergoing judgment would not be allowed to head towards Osiris and immortality. Now I don't want to delve too much into that because hint hint, it might be our next number. Now, Ammit was not whatsoever worshipped in Egyptian mythology, but instead she embodied all that the Egyptians feared, threatening to bind them to eternal restlessness if they did not follow the principles of Ma'at. Now, Ammit has a huge influence on popular culture, appearing as a recurring character in the cartoon Mummies Alive, as well as intermittently in the Kane Chronicles, trilogy based on Egyptian myths. However, more famously, she also appeared in video games such as Lara Croft, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Palladium RPG. Coming in at 2, Anubis and afterlife. Anubis is the Greek name of the god of death, mummification, embalming, the afterlife, cemeteries, tombs, and the underworld in ancient Egyptian religion. Is usually depicted as a canine or a man with a canine head. However, like many Egyptian gods, Anubis assumed different roles in mythology, often depicted as a protector of graves as early as the first dynasty. Most famously, his prominent role was as a god who ushered souls into the afterlife. He attended the weighing scale during the weighing of the heart, in which it was determined whether a soul would be allowed to enter the realm of the dead. The critical scene depicting the weighing of the heart appears in the Book of the Dead, and shows Anubis performing a measurement that determined whether a person was worthy to pass on, by weighing the heart of a deceased person against Ma'at, aka Truth, who was often represented as an ostrich feather. Anubis dictated the fate of souls. Souls that were heavier than the feather would be devoured by our previous number, Ammit, and souls lighter than the feather would ascend to a heavenly existence. Anubis was depicted in black, a colour that symbolises regeneration, life, the soil of the Nile River, and the discoloration of the corpse after embalming. More interesting still, Anubis, one of the most frequently represented deities in ancient Egyptian art, with the god being depicted on royal tombs from the first dynasty. In funerary contexts, Anubis is shown either attending to a deceased person's mummy or sitting atop a tomb protecting it. New Kingdom tomb seals depict Anubis sitting atop the 9 bows that symbolize his domination over the enemies of Egypt.
Governor of the bows who is upon his mountain. They have only my smile.
So be it. Zaya! Zaya!
Step forward.
I shall live forever!
And finally, coming in at number 1, the creation of the world. To the Egyptians, the journey began with the creation of the world and the universe out of the darkness and swirling chaos. They believed that at the beginning there was nothing but endless dark water without form or purpose. Supposedly existing within the void was Heka, god of magic, who awaited the moment of creation. And out of the watery silence rose the primordial hill known as Benben, upon which stood Atum, the great god. Atum looked upon the nothingness and recognized his aloneness, and so, through magic, he mated with his own shadow to give birth to 2 children, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture. The children then left their father on Benben and set out to establish the world. During his children's absence, Atum became so concerned about them he removed his eye and sent it in search of them, during which time he sat alone on the hill in the midst of chaos and contemplated eternity. Later, Shu and Tefnut would return with their father's eye, and their father, grateful for their return, shed tears of joy. Those tears, dropping onto the darkness, gave birth to men and women. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with that list? Were there any Egyptian myths that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 2. Before we go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos, top 5 scary churches where praying won't help you. Jabba Yogi said, "Ah, don't worry about it, Lucy. You're the queen. We'll just change the pronunciations to whatever you say it is." Bless. I hope you feel the same way about this video, as well as every single other video I do from here on out. Can't pronounce names. Mama Bear said, "I just love watching you, Lucy. You're def my favorite. Shh, don't tell Jack, lol."
Come on.
Jack's actually right.
I heard that.
Jack's here. He heard it, but it's fine. He had to know. He had to know at some point.
Yeah, you're my favorite too.
Oh, thanks. I'm my favorite too. Nah, no, Jack's my favorite. Colleen Posley said, do the scariest churches in fiction. That post-gothic monstrosity from In the Mouth of Madness leaps nimbly to mind. I like where your head's at, Colleen. I'll get on that immediately. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary bit. And until next time, see you later.